On this episode of the AAF Exchange, Fitch downgrades of the U.S. debt, the latest economic news, and Congress's September must-do list. Joining us to discuss all this is AAF's Douglas Holtz-Eakin. Doug, thanks for joining us.
Great to be back.
Yeah.
Tan, rested, and ready.
I was going to say, it's been a while. I feel like you and I have both been, on vacation, sitting, not being here at AAF or in D.C., but...
Yeah, but I went to a nice place, and you went to Vermont.
Right, well... Okay, well, I'm not going to get into a battle of states with you today, but, sitting by the lake up in Vermont and sitting on the golf course in Vermont were just as beautiful to me.
Okay.
So I'm going to keep it. So it's been a while, so I'm sure there's a lot on your mind, but if you could narrow it down to one thing, what is on your mind?
I'm increasingly frustrated with the state of the immigration policy debate and reality on the ground. We have a bipartisan consensus that illegal immigration is a problem and should be cut back, and we're seemingly making no progress whatsoever on that. We can get no consensus whatsoever on the remainder of the legal immigration system and what we're going to do with STEM immigration and more immigration more broadly. And the Canadians just stole 10,000 of our H-1B candidates. So we're getting nothing done despite the fact that we have problems everywhere I look. And that's been true for 20 years. So, yeah, I'm getting a little frustrated.
Yeah. It seems to me the latest attempt was in the lame duck session of the last Congress. But I haven't really heard much out of this Congress in terms of tangible, actual things that they're working on. I know there's a few bipartisan bills out there, but they don't really seem to be getting much traction.
We have, for example, there was the Farm Worker Modernization Act last Congress, and bipartisan consensus, and a lot of talk that it was going to go in the end of year lame duck, and nothing happened. So things which are relatively small bore, bipartisan consensus, become hostages to the larger issues, never get done. The larger issues just plague us. So, and I don't think there's anything about a presidential election cycle that's going to make this better. It's going to get worse.
Yeah, and as you've written before, just for, take the politics out of this. This is a good economic...
this is the best economic lever we could pull. Yeah. Period.
We could do a whole podcast, I'm assuming, on immigration, but it seems like an important topic, and maybe we'll start hearing some better things on it going forward.
I hope so.
But we'll have to watch and see. All right, let's go to the economy, but we'll start with the biggest economic news that should have been on everybody's radar, and that's Fitch downgraded the U.S. Debt rating from its highest rating of AAA to rating AA+. Citing a steady deterioration in standards of governance. First, before we get into anything else, what does this mean for the U.S. economy?
Essentially nothing. There are three major rating agencies. S&P and Moody's have not changed the rating. So if you need a AAA-rated security to put in your portfolio, they're out there. Moody's and S&P are providing them. Investors have not diminished their appetite for Treasury, so interest rates are not affected by this. It's really a shot across the bow on the governance front to Congress and the administration about their handling of fiscal policy.
Yeah. So, so basically what they're saying is that, we're on an unsustainable debt track. We're spending too much. The party's got to start dying down here. Is that basically what they're saying? And Fitch is just being the first one to say, fire the warning shot, and the other two are like, yeah.
Yeah, that is what they're saying. So if you read the report, they say three things. One is the governance, but the other things they say are, if you look at debts and deficits, they are high and rising, for the foreseeable future, especially over the next 5-6 years, and there is no plan to make any progress on this front. So that's the real indictment, right? The facts on the ground are high and rising debt and deficits, and no plan to take it on. And I think that's really what triggered it.
Yeah, let's get into the reaction on this, because it was really quite interesting to hear some of the the Biden administration saying the downgrade was unfair and poorly timed. And what's your take on all of that?
So, number one, they got an advanced copy of the report. They were briefed by Fitch, and so they knew it was coming. And, they set out to shoot the messenger the moment the messenger opened his mouth. And so we saw just a concerted effort by the White House to dismiss the report as bizarre, unfounded at this time. And they were shocked, evidently, that they got the downgrade. I'm not. Fitch put the U.S. on watch for downgrade during the debt ceiling debate earlier this year. They said, we're watching. We came out of that with a suspension of the debt ceiling until January of 2025 and a fig leaf called the Fiscal Responsibility Act that is one of the great nothing burgers of all time, where there's open agreement that although they have discretionary caps in there, they have ways around them. They made handshake deals to make sure the spending happens, so it's not going to do anything. And, I think Fitch took one look at that and said, no, enough. And we're already seeing both sides get ready to shut the government at the end of September. So I think that there is no observable improvement in this sort of brinksmanship, and there's literally no leadership out of the White House on this. I mean, they have steadily over the past couple of years, sort of proposed various versions of American Family Plans, American Jobs Plans, Build Back Better plans that did not add up and were going to blow a huge hole in the structural deficit. That's not leadership. The president took the State of the Union to say we're not going to fix Social Security and Medicare. I mean, I think, if they're surprised, they need to look in the mirror. I mean, they have a lot of fiscal problems. Like right now, I wrote this in the Daily Dish earlier this week, if you just look at the year-over-year deficit in the monthly Treasury statements, they are high and rising. Like the red ink is getting deeper and deeper while they have the president running around saying he's the greatest deficit reducer in history. It's embarrassing.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the reasons why even the Washington Post, I think, gave them the bottomless Pinocchio on this deficit reduction, line that they continuously use in all this. But and I think Fitch has picked up on that and part of the problem. Let's move on to another favorite topic of ours, inflation and the Fed. There's a lot going on there. Last week, as expected, the Fed raised its interest rates by 25 basis points. Will this hike have an impact, and where do we go from here?
The hike will have an impact. Clearly, the Fed continues to be vigilant about the inflation outlook. We've gotten a lot of good reports recently. I mean, sort of promising reports. I think there's a little bit of a premature spiking of the football going on out there. The inflation is embedded in the economy, and it comes out slowly, and it's going to take longer than I think people realize. But the other thing to remember is if you look at broader measures of financial tightness, like there are various financial market indicators that Chicago Federal Reserve has my favorite. They show that basically financial conditions are looser now than they were last year. So while the Fed has continued to raise rates, making credit conditions tighter, equity markets have been soaring, and if you need money, you just go to the equity markets to get it. Overall financial market conditions are not as tight as I think the Fed would like, and so they're worried about that. And the fiscal spending is just still going on, and so it's leaning against the Fed. And at some point, we may just see the progress on inflation stall out. That's my concern. And so, we're worth being vigilant.
Yeah, it was interesting last week because in Chair Powell's press conference that he does after they talk about this, he also mentioned that the Fed economists are no longer predicting a recession, which I found quite interesting.
Yeah, we've had this phenomenon where the staff gives a staff forecast at every FOMC meeting, and for 3 meetings in a row, they said, look, we're going to have a recession late in the year. It'll last 2 quarters, mild, and then next year we'll resume growth, but have better inflation outlook. Obviously, we got a strong second quarter report, and they've taken that actual negative growth out of this year for sure, maybe out of their forecast entirely. We'll find out.
Interesting. Finally, tomorrow is Jobs Day, a favorite of ours around here. What do you think we'll learn from this report?
Again, I think what we've seen is steady progress in slowing the demand for labor. I think we'll see that again. We'll get, in my view, something like 150,000 jobs. And the real issue is what are we going on with average hourly earnings, and sort of hours and other components of demand for labor.
Yeah, so, I mean, we also saw that ADP number, I think it was earlier this week, that came in pretty hot.
Yes.
I mean,
print that report and then burn it. That report says that we created 200,000 jobs in leisure and hospitality, and that just feels like seasonal adjustment errors. I was talking about this with Gordon Gray, who does our job stuff. I think the ADP guys are Australian. And I think they've got the seasonals messed up. It's my current view.
I mean, it really does feel that way, though, right? Because it's like, you know, July, you don't see, you expect to see those large increases because, you know, people are going to the resort towns, they're going to the ocean cities, the Nantuckets, the wherever, what have you.
They have to fill my liquor order when I'm on vacation. I mean, we need those people.
Where else are you going to get your wine from when you're on vacation, Doug? Yeah, so I mean, it just feels like they're not adjusting for that, and that's why we're seeing those large numbers. But does that change? Does that say anything about what tomorrow might bring?
I don't think the BLS has the big problem with the seasonal. So you just want to sort of ignore the ADP number because of that, and ask yourself, what is the trajectory of the economy? It's not down. It's stronger than we thought. But the Fed continues to try to lean against more rapid growth, and so I think that gets you a number that looks like 150,000. That's more than is needed to fill the population growth. So it's still a relatively hot labor market.
Interesting. Let's do some trivia. I know it's your favorite part of the day, but let's do some anyways.
Yeah, why not?
All right, here we go. As Dan Goldbeck recently noted in his Week in Regs, the Department of Energy recently proposed a rule for consumer water heaters. What makes
this one?
What makes this rule particularly notable?
It's I think it's the most expensive single rule.
Making it the costliest set of energy efficient standards out of the so far during the Biden administration.
In the Biden and Obama administrations, the DOEs always just take dead aim at water heaters, washing machines. It's amazing. Goes with yes.
Particular importance to some of us. I know maybe not to you non-foodies in the world.
I don't understand it, but it's fine.
But I mean, it's just continuing on this track record from the Biden administration of just keeping this grip on the economy through the regulatory process.
Yeah, and again, we saw something like this on a more modest scale in the Obama administration. I thought it was a big headwind to growth coming out of the Great Recession. This doesn't strike me as good news for the economy. And so I continue to be less optimistic than some about the path for economic growth. And I think the only reason why it hasn't sort of slowed down is the massive amount of spending that's going on. And people forget that this takes time to happen. But, after the American Rescue Plan, put that in the rearview mirror, they still did the Inflation Reduction Act, which was front-loaded, didn't do anything. They did CHIPS and Science, $300 billion. They did the PATH Act, $600 billion. They had an enormous omnibus at the end of the Congress. But all that's flowing out now. And you've essentially got a less dramatic but more steady fiscal stimulus going on a regular basis. And that's, that has impacts on the economy.
Yeah, well, we'll continue to watch the regulations. Dan Goldbeck does a great job, and we'll have to keep watching those. I still love those charts every week just to see the chart where it says this is where he compares to each of the previous administrations.
It's mind-boggling. It really is. I
shouldn't say I love it because it's not a good news, but
it's fascinating, and our guys do a great job of tracking this stuff, and I don't know anyone else who's genuinely has their finger on the pulse of the administrative state the way the Goldbeck crowd does.
I know. Like just from looking at doing the digital, I can see who's seeing who's interacting with our emails, and it's a lot of those trade publications that follow that regulatory stuff. So that says to me that it's valuable tool for a lot of these people to follow the regulatory state on a day-to-day basis.
Every now and then there's a head fake, and there was this weird thing where the Federal Register reported that there were 347, I think it was, presidential announcements one day, and Dan had a head, his head exploded. It turned out it was some sort of weird uploading error of a single executive order.
Yeah, there's still people on the other end of this that are, once in a while you get a mistake.
Yes.
All right, let's end today on probably just an introduction. We could do a whole podcast on this topic, and that's what Congress has to do before it ends this year. Especially they're gone for August. They're coming back in September. Their traditional August recess, but they have a pretty lengthy list of unfinished work. Would you walk us through the must-dos before the start of the next fiscal year on October 1st?
Well, I mean, the top priority is clearly funding the government, and we can devote a longer session to my pessimism on that front, but I am pessimistic that they'll get to yes on the approach process. They still have the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, to finish. There's a Senate version, a House version. They are worlds apart. Have to get a conference committee and get that done. They need to do an FAA reauthorization. They need to do a farm bill. We still don't have any spectrum auction authority. My favorite, the National Flood Insurance Program, is tiptoeing toward non-existence. They need to reauthorize it. You just go down the list. There are a lot of things that need to be reauthorized, and there's some that we just don't pay a lot of attention to. Little health programs and things like that. They have a lot to get done. No question.
What are some of those biggest hurdles that the chamber's respective leaderships, Senate Democrats, House Republicans, will have to navigate?
I think you've got Senate Democratic leadership and you've got Republican House leadership, and so their priorities are very different. What they're willing to tolerate in bills is different, and so getting conference agreements is going to be really hard. Conference agreements that can pass the House on basically Republican votes and the Senate on basically Democratic votes. And in some cases, that's not going to happen. So to cut to the end, when they finally fund the government at some point this fall, I think it will be a Senate bill that a big majority of Republicans in the House will not support, but Democratic votes will get it over the finish line. Yeah,
it's interesting to me because, as a student of government, it seems like when there is divided leadership in the Congress like this, perfect time for White House to step in and sort of bring everybody together. But I haven't really heard much other than messaging.
Right. It doesn't feel that way, especially on the approach process. Now, it's always hard to know what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
The White House has a new head of Leg Affairs, familiar to McCarthy and crowd, has a long history with them. So, that could bode well for having good channels of communication, getting this done. I just really don't see, within the Republican caucus, the capacity to say, okay, we accept what the Senate Democrats want. I just don't see it. They're going to say no. And then typically we would do a CR and they're going to say, no, we're not doing a CR. That's not funding the government. We want to fund it at lower levels. And so that's going to be the initial breakdown. And after that, there will be a lot of fussing, and at some point they'll get to yes.
To yes. Well, we'll have to talk. Well, I mean, we could do, like I said, we could do a whole podcast on the budget, on what's left for Congress to do. I mean, the farm bill is also out there. All those sorts of things are out there. So I'm sure we'll have you back as we get closer to September and Congress coming back to break down that a little bit more. In the meantime, I don't know if you're excited, but I'm excited to have football back in our lives.
Yes, Hall of Fame game tonight.
This is the last day. Yesterday was the last day we don't have football until the Super Bowl on a particular week. So I'm happy with that.
And you're including the Patriots as football.
Yes, I'm of course including the rebounding Patriots as we're back. I love our new offense, so I'm hoping and my baseball season just ended on Tuesday, Doug. So for the first time ever, the Yankees and the Red Sox did nothing, and the league seems to be topsy-turvy, so I don't understand it anymore.
You just need to be a Pirates fan. Then you're completely zen, no matter what happens.
I lived through too many good years, Doug. I don't know how to do this whole
losing thing,
yeah, and being in pain thing.
I can explain that to you.
Maybe another podcast we can talk about that. So thanks for joining us, Doug.
Thank you.